Blastoff by Joe West. This is the story of a man called Albert, and one night that would change his life forever. Albert wasn't a big man, no beard or belly or bad temper. He was as thin as a rake, no taller than a cupboard. You'd miss him if you didn't know where to look. You might well know someone like Albert where you live. He has a little flat cap, a pair of glasses that just sit on the end of his nose, always looking like they're about to fall off. He has a knitted cardigan, and if you ask nicely, he might have a couple of lemon sherbets handy. He has an allotment on the edge of the village and a big garden with a shed. If you asked anyone about Albert, they might say he was nice, pleasant, a bit fuddy-duddy. But if you asked his neighbours about that shed, they'd all agree that they were dying to get a look inside. You see, at the bottom of Albert's allotment is a shed. But this shed isn't like any other shed. This shed has massive metal barrels strapped to the side. It has aerials and wires sticking out just about any which way you can think of. The roof has been swapped out for a pointy nozzle like a big pencil, and it has fins on the side. For swimming? No, for flying. But we'll get to that soon. Albert could be found at the shed almost every day and every night. In the summer, he would climb on top and hammer in nails until it went dark, which in the summer, as you know, means very late. Even now it was Christmas Eve, no less. Albert made the walk up to his shed. Even in winter, every night Albert would get all wrapped up in his scarf and big coat and head out to the shed. He'd be in there all night. Anyone nearby could hear whizzes and whirs and very strange sounds, like a mechanical bull was charging around in there. Of course, anyone who knew Albert knew not to get too close to the shed, and that's probably not bad advice to follow either. There were, of course, a brave few who knocked on from time to time, including Albert's neighbour, Mr. Peters. Mr. Peters wasn't a large man either, but he also wasn't too small. Mr. Peters' hair stood in 4 straight lines. He always had his top button done, even in the summer, and his shoes were so shiny you could eat your dinner off of them. Although I don't imagine you'd want to. Mr. Peters knocked on with 3 sharp knocks. He wanted to talk to Albert. You see, Albert had a secret. It was the reason his shed was so special, and the reason he spent so much time in it. Albert's family had been abducted by aliens. Albert didn't know why they wanted his family. Maybe it was a mistake, or a misunderstanding. Albert just remembers one night there were some bright lights, loud noises, and then they were gone. This is why Albert is turning his shed into a spaceship, so he can go and find his family. But all of this made Mr. Peters very cross. So when Mr. Peters knocked on the shed with 3 sharp knocks, he told Albert that he should go to see the doctor. He told Albert he should give up on his shed, or he'd hurt himself. Now, Albert wasn't a scientist or an engineer, and as a matter of fact he had hurt himself many times, but that was none of Mr. Peters' business. Mr. Peters got even crosser. He said he saw Albert take a parcel last week that was glowing. Albert said yes, plutonium can be very dangerous if not handled properly. And Albert was right about that, of course. Mr. Peters stormed off, calling Albert all sorts of bad words. Bad words nobody should ever say to anyone. Especially not someone who has converted their shed into a spaceship. Because it might just inspire them to blast off. Albert climbed inside his console and checked all his measurements and readings. The clocks were ticking, the drips were dripping, and the engines were whirring. Tonight was the night. After all, a miracle was to happen. Surely it'd happen at Christmas. Because Albert knew, even from when he was a boy, that even when things look sad or bleak, there's magic in the air on Christmas Eve. There's secret presents moving about, and hushed surprises in the works, and stolen kisses under lamplights. There's just an ever so small chance of snow. It was 4 o'clock on this Christmas Eve, but of course, it was so dark it felt a lot later. The last buses and trains were making their way back to the stations, the shops were closing their shutters, and the grottos were sending off their final letters. The churchgoers were wrapping up warm for midnight mass, and the carolers were braving the chilly air to visit houses. Nothing new was starting now. Albert looked up through the little porthole at the stars above, and wondered if the rest of the universe knew it was Christmas Eve. He was certain it did, of course. Or if the people up there didn't know about Christmas, they would surely know it was a special night nonetheless. Then he looked down at his little shed, his modest effort at a homemade spaceship, and he laughed. Oh, when he got up there, they'd probably laugh at his contraption. If he got up there, of course. He shook his head and started working down the consoles, pressing buttons and flicking dials. To be honest, he didn't really understand a lot of it, but it looked like he did on the pictures, so he was happy with it. He checked his phone. He had a message from Dorothy down the road. If he wasn't busy tomorrow, she'd love to have him round for Christmas dinner. He texted back and said if he's not halfway across the universe, he'd be there. He clicked his seatbelt and checked it twice, and he started the countdown. 10, 9, 8. Oh, but he was nervous. What if he'd miscounted? Would he become one big Albert firework? 7, 6. No, he'd practiced and practiced. After all, practice makes perfect. He managed to get the shed over to the high street one night. How far could space be from that? 5, 4, 3. He shut his eyes tight and thought about his family. He was coming for them. 2, 1. Nothing. He opened his eyes. Did it work? Should it be this quiet? He looked around and everything was still whirring and buzzing. But it didn't sound happy. He was in an unhappy spaceship. He ran to the window as if he might look out and see the moon, but he was still there on the allotment. It hadn't worked. This made Albert very upset. He called the spaceship several words that you should never call a spaceship, and sulked in his chair. He thought he was stupid for trying, which of course he wasn't, but that's how he felt. He couldn't figure out where he was going wrong. He glanced back up at the monitor again, but it beeped at him angrily, and he hit it back. He called it another bad word, turned in his chair, and closed his eyes tight. He didn't want to have anything more to do with this shed. Then he heard a voice. "Oh, Albert, that's no way to treat a spaceship." Albert looked up and couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him, bold as brash, was a man the opposite of him. A big red cloak, beard as white as snow, and cheeks as red as the flashing lights on the dashboard. Father Christmas was stood in his shed. Oh, Albert knew he must be going mad now. What was Father Christmas doing in his shed? Santa Claus just laughed like he knew what Albert was thinking. He went about tweaking the knobs and dials here and there, as casual as a train conductor. "Well, you're not going to get far with that proton accelerator blown out. What have you been doing to it? And you were close with your readings, but you should really count these in tens, not hundreds." Albert's mouth dropped open. Father Christmas had apparently come into his shed, and now he was bad-mouthing his work. Unbelievable. Albert sat back in his chair and threw up his arms. He said, "This is it. He's definitely gone mad. Round the twist. He must have crashed halfway to Hull, and now he's dreaming. I don't have long, so you best stop sulking. You want to find your family, don't you?" Albert sprung up. How did he know about that? The jolly man tapped his nose. "I know everything, dear boy. Just like how I knew you wanted that Meccano set when you were 8 years old, but you were too shy to ask." Albert huffed. That was an easy guess. "And how you saved up all school year to buy Daisy Etherington a necklace from the market? Of course you didn't quite have enough, so I might have slipped that £10 note into the snow for you to find." Albert blushed. He must be the real deal. Albert asked, "So you know about my family?" "Of course half the universe knows about your family." Albert asked if Santa could help him find them, with his magical sleigh and everything. But Santa said he couldn't do that. Albert argued, "Well, he's Father Christmas, isn't he? Can't he do everything?" "Well, I am Father Christmas, and this is Christmas Eve. I've got to deliver presents all across the world tonight. Oh, if Mrs. Claus knew I was here. Still, there's always room for one miracle, I say. No, my boy, you're going to get you out there." All of a sudden, every light on the dashboard lit up at once. Albert looked quizzically. How did he do that? "Never mind that. Light the ignitions for me, lad, and set the capacitors to full." Santa talked Albert through everything he needed to do inside the shed. Albert saw him sneaking in a few gears here and there, but he didn't say anything. You don't question Father Christmas, after all. The jolly man helped strap Albert in, because even in space, you should always wear your seatbelt. He told Albert all about where he'd be going and what he needed to do when he got there. "Don't forget to check the oil pressure. Trust me on that one." Albert was a bit shy to admit his oil pressure was on an egg timer. "Oh, you lot do make me laugh." Santa stood back and took in Albert. "No, my boy, I think you're ready." I'll give you a lift, of course, but don't tell anyone." Santa winked with one of his twinkling eyes, and Albert started to tear up. Oh, they were happy tears, but tears all the same. He didn't think he'd ever get to this point, and now here he was, being helped by Father Christmas. Santa shook his hand tight. His gloves were warm and cozy. He winked at Albert again and slipped out. Now, if I told you exactly what happened at this next part, you wouldn't believe me. From where Albert sat, there was a lot of banging and clashing from above. But if you were to be stood in the allotment on that snowy night, you'd see a jolly man in a big red coat with a sled as big as a car. You'd see 12 reindeers neighing and waiting eagerly to go. You'd see the man linking up to the shed with a glowing chain. Magical, you might even think. And you'd see the sleigh take off into the night with the shed behind it. If you were inside that shed, you'd see Albert cheering and wooing and crying his heart out. Happy tears, but tears all the same. He was finally getting to see his family. And if you were on that sleigh, you'd hear Santa Claus laughing away and see him release that chain. He'd do a couple of magnificent flips in the air and watch the shed abseil away into the night, off up to the stars. He wasn't always allowed to do miracles, but just this once, one slipped through. Godspeed, Albert, and good luck. Merry Christmas.